Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker. You are listening to episode number 68, or you're watching episode number 68 on YouTube. Today is Sunday, October 29th, Halloween weekend. So happy Halloween, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good time with the Halloween festivities this weekend. I'm coming to you from Arizona, so the other side of the country that I'm normally on. And I'm joined all the way from New Jersey by my co-host, Jeff the Animal Wilson. Jeff, how's the weather up there in New Jersey, my friend?
Bill, it is raining. We got a monsoon out here. Total opposite of your weather. So, Bill, why don't you tell the listeners where you're at and why you're having a hard time breathing over there?
I am a little short of breath. I'm at elevation right now in Flagstaff, Arizona. So started the trip off in Phoenix. It was hot as fuck, like unbearably hot. And this is supposed to be when it starts to cool off. And the temperature wasn't insane. It was like 94, 95, but when you're in the sun, it's pretty unbearable. And it's so dry. So it's a very different heat than I'm used to in Tampa. But what's amazing to me is the difference in temperature in the sun versus in the shade. Like if you're walking down the street and there's buildings and you go sun, shade, it's like you're walking in and out of air conditioned rooms. There's probably like a 15-degree difference between the sunshine and the shade in Phoenix. It was pretty bizarre, but pretty cool too. And then when you're out in the sun, like walking around, your pores kind of open up, but it's so dry you don't sweat. So you're just walking around with like your pores open and you're hot and your body any relief. It's a very strange sensation, Jeff, that I've been coping with lots of alcohol. The same way I cope with other things, which probably doesn't help with the dryness, but it helps with, me having booze while I'm on vacation. So this will be a booze heavy podcast, Jeff, because if you think I talk about alcohol a lot normally, now this is vacation Bill talking, during which time, I had to try all the local spirits. And I want to thank everybody who's reached out on Twitter and Instagram and elsewhere on social media, Facebook, and given me some awesome recommendations. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to try everything that was recommended to me, although I am to, I think, Lumberjack Brewery. There's some brewery here in Flagstaff someone recommended to me that I plan to make it to. So I started the week off, Jeff. I decided to save some money, pick up a bottle of bourbon, and, just to get me through the week. So I was looking for some Arizona whiskeys, and I was asking around, and people said Arizona is more known for craft beer, which fine by me, but I just wanted to have a bottle of whiskey to keep on hand. So I went with a High West bourbon, which comes from Utah. So I figured local enough. I'll hold this up for the people viewing on YouTube here. So High West, one of my favorite whiskeys they make is the High West Campfire. I believe I've talked about it on the show before. Jeff, you and I might have had some High West Campfire before too, back when I was living in Jersey. So I decided to go with the bourbon because I was just in the mood for bourbon, and I really love the Campfire whiskey, so I thought the bourbon would be great too. I'm not as big a fan of the American Prairie bourbon, Jeff. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's been doing the trick. Obviously, you could tell I'm pretty deep into this bottle right now. It may not even last me the rest of the week. But what I did is I picked up a little shooter of this Sweet Retreat vanilla liqueur. I'll hold this up here. It's a real mellow vanilla liqueur. It's only 15% alcohol. But it adds like just the perfect amount of sweetness to the bourbon. So I would definitely recommend picking up one of these and adding it to your bourbon. If you have a bourbon that has a little bit too much bite for you, this is actually perfect to kind of mellow it out and take some of that bite off. And it makes it super smooth and really tasty. They also make a root beer one. So I tried the root beer in the bourbon as well, and that was really good. Gave me the idea to maybe come up with a recipe for a root beer old fashioned. So that's something I'm going to be working on. I have some other boozy things to talk about, but This is an MMA podcast after all, Jeff, and I know you're itching to talk about the upcoming pay-per-view that you'll be attending next week at Madison Square Garden. So before we get to that even, let's talk about UFC Fight Night 119 from Sao Paulo, Brazil, which took place yesterday. It was kind of nice for me to watch this a little earlier, being on the West Coast. I didn't have to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30, 2 o'clock after all the post-fight and everything is over. I know you had a hard time getting through this card, Jeff, so this card took place in Brazil, but not a good night for the Brazilians in the main and co-main events. Lyoto Machida and Damian Maia both coming away with losses and both looking last night. So what were your thoughts on this card overall, Jeff? And then let's start at the top with the main event and work our way down.
Yeah, Bill, this card, top to bottom, was pretty awesome. I started watching the main event of the prelims, and even that was super awesome. So top to bottom, overall, I think it was a really good night. I feel like for some reason the fight nights, they've been good lately, but I feel like the ones in Brazil always deliver. No disappointments there. So Bill, why don't you get us started here? Because unfortunately, like you said, over on the East Coast, it was a little hard to stay awake. It was around like 1:30 when I went to sleep. No, 12:30. So I was in the middle of the co-main event, but I caught the main event this morning. So Bill, why don't you fill us in over here and why they're calling Derek Brunson the Dragon Slayer today?
Man, I was saying it last week when we were talking about breaking this card down, and I was getting more and more excited for it as we were talking through it. We didn't really know what to expect from Lyoto Machida. He had a 2-year layoff, which was a bullshit suspension that he had in the first place because he was taking some kind of banned supplement or something, and he realized it was on the banned list, and he came out and said, like, hey, everybody, I'm sorry, I was taking this. I didn't realize it was on the banned list. They took that as a confession and suspended him for 2 years, which is fucking awful because he could have just kept his mouth shut. He wasn't testing positive or anything. He just came out and said, like, hey, I realize I'm taking this and it's banned. I'm sorry. And they're like, oh, no problem. Take this 2-year suspension. Meanwhile, you got other guys that, probably should have had longer suspensions and they're not getting them. So there's some unfortunate politics with these suspensions and things like that. So hopefully they get a little bit more uniform as time goes on here. And, but regardless, you have to expect that Lyoto Machida is going to be disciplined in his training and come in prepared to fight top-level competition no matter how much time he's had off. And he did look a little bit flat, maybe, a little bit of ring rust, which maybe you can enlighten us on, Jeff, because I know you have some theories about ring rust. But I think the result of this fight, which was a knockout for Derek Brunson, was a result of Derek Brunson being patient, but not overly patient like he was in the Anderson Silva fight. It was a patient Derek Brunson who was able to pull the trigger. And a patient Derek Brunson who's able to pull the trigger is a dangerous Derek Brunson. And if this is the way he's going to fight going forward and, not running face first across the cage at his opponents, this is a serious threat in the middleweight division. So there's a lot of people who have to watch out for Derek Brunson. He's very explosive, incredible takedown defense. And there's a lot of interesting matchups for him. He called out Luke Rockhold. But let's talk about this Lyoto Machida fight. So he counter-struck the counter-striker and landed a nasty left hook that basically put him out cold. And, then pounced on him to finish the job. And Lyoto was down for the count. So Lyoto Machida looking a little bit slower than we're used to seeing him. I mean, 2 years is a long time when you're in your upper 30s to be away from the cage. So what were your thoughts on this fight, Jeff, since you saw it a little more recently than I did?
Bill, I think Derek Brunson looked great, man. I think he was calculated, he was methodical, and overall he wasn't nervous. He was not too tentative as he was against Anderson Silva. I think that he came in with the right game plan. I think that he just looked great in there. He looked super calm, super comfortable. And good for him. He beat a really tough guy. And I know we've been saying how Lyoto Machida is, coming off a 2-year layoff. He's getting up there in age, but this dude's he's a really good fighter, man. He's a dangerous guy. So the fact that Brunson was able to beat him, that's a really big asterisk on your resume there.
Yeah, for sure. I think you can't take anything away from Derek Brunson in this fight for the fact that Machida is coming in a little bit older. I mean, he's still, he's coming in fresh, basically. He had 2 years to rest his body, and I'm sure he was training smart, as he always has. And I don't know if this is the end of the line for him or not. I would like to see him get back in there. I don't think we really got to see a good enough idea of where he is in his career. Obviously he's pushing 40, but he also lives the kind of lifestyle where his body's preserved. He drinks a lot of his own piss and, stuff like that I'm sure has holistic benefits that I have no intention of finding out about, but he does them, and it seemed to work for him so far. So Derek Brunson calls out Luke Rockhold. There's a lot of other interesting matchups for him in this division, though. Maybe a rematch with Jacare, maybe a rematch with Yoel Romero, two guys that he has losses to, I believe. I don't think he'll get a rematch with Robert Whittaker right now since he's holding the interim title. So that's part of the bottlenecking we got going on in the middleweight division right now. What would you like to see next for both of these guys, Jeff?
Ooh, that's a tough one, man. For Derek Brunson, I want to see him take on a more ranked contender, so 185. Dude, that division is it's a little bottlenecked right now. So that's tough.
You like the Luke Rockhold call out?
I think I don't know if it's a good idea, Bill. Luke Rockhold is someone that you have to take very seriously. You cannot. I don't think that was a good idea to call him out. I think he'd be better off fighting. I want to see him fight David Branch, actually. I'd like to see that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. David Branch looked pretty good in his last fight. I like the Rockhold matchup for Brunson right now. Brunson's got a little bit of momentum behind him right now. So, and we saw Luke Rockhold has lazy defense. He fights with his hands down a lot, and David Branch was able to catch him in that last fight. So if he fights like that against Derek Brunson, and Derek Brunson picks his shots like he did against Lyoto Machida, that's going to be a bad night for Luke Rockhold. And plus, Derek Brunson is really hard to take down and even harder to hold down. So that might be a little bit past Luke Rockhold's wrestling capabilities. But at the same time, Luke Rockhold is still dangerous everywhere. I think it's an interesting matchup. I wouldn't mind seeing that one. And then maybe see Lyoto Machida and David Branch. That might be a fun fight, especially the way David Branch has been pressuring in his fights lately. All right, let's get to the co-main event, which I think a lot more people were talking about. My whole Twitter feed this morning was Colby Covington. And I thought this was a spectacular performance. And I thought his last fight was a spectacular performance as well. A lot of people didn't agree on both accounts. This was... So Colby Covington and Damian Maia was a battle of two below-average strikers slugging it out and having a bloody war. And, they're not great strikers, but their striking is almost on the same level. I think Colby Covington might be slightly better, but as far as being an elite striker, neither of them are anywhere near that title or that ranking, but they're both elite level grapplers. So like I was saying last week, when you have two elite grapplers going head to head, sometimes you end up with a striking battle. And by the time Damian Maia tried to take this fight to the ground, he didn't have much left in the gas tank. So good luck taking down an All-American wrestler like Colby Covington, who was able to basically just stomp out every single takedown attempt by Damian Maia. And that third round was just a bloodbath and a one-sided beating. Definitely a 10-8 round in my books for Colby Covington. But the real story of the fight was Colby Covington's post-fight interview in which he said, "Brazil, you're a dump." And then he said, "I think you're a bunch of filthy animals." So this was this is a story. I see. I'm judging by your face, Jeff. You didn't hear any of this.
No, no, I didn't.
he he
Oh
had to
my
be
God.
he had to be escorted
Jeez.
by security out of the arena as pretty much everybody with something in their hands was throwing stuff at Colby Covington, and then he had to have armed security at his hotel last night. And then he issued an apology statement that was going around Twitter today that said, basically, I'm sorry if I offended any of you filthy Brazilian animals. More or less. So, yeah, Colby Covington, impressive performance. I mean, he landed more significant strikes on Damian Maia in 3 rounds than Tyron Woodley was able to land on him in 5 rounds. So that was a really interesting statistic, I thought. And just an overall really impressive performance. I mean, he neutralized the grappling of Damian Maia with his elite level wrestling, which I've been an advocate for the longest time that wrestling is the best base to have in MMA because you get to dictate where the fight takes place. So for Colby Covington, if he's fighting someone who has better striking than him, which will be a lot of guys, he can take the fight to the ground with pretty much anybody. Fighting someone with better grappling skills than him, he can keep the fight standing like he did with Damian Maia. So, Jeff, let me get your reaction to Colby Covington's post-fight comments here.
Yeah, Bill, that was not, I don't think that was a smart move at all. I think he messed up, man. I think there's going to be some very strong repercussions for him. Although I gotta be honest, it was entertaining. I just I'm so taken aback because I didn't expect that. And like I said, this was
I don't think anybody expected that.
dude. After round 2, I fell asleep because it was about 12:30. I'd been out all day. I was pretty tired. But yeah, I thought the fight itself was pretty good, just because they were at the same level of striking. It just annoyed me that every now and then Maia would just shoot in for a takedown, and Covington did a really good job of his takedown defense, and I think he's got pretty solid takedown defense compared to other fighters in the UFC, and he just did a good job keeping it on the feet. And I think just about anybody would have probably done the same strategy against Demian Maia. Just keep the fight standing. Don't let him get you to the ground because we all know how dangerous he is. So pretty entertaining stuff. And I know that it's not good publicity, but they say that any publicity is good publicity, right? So he might have put his name out
Yeah,
there.
I mean, dude, it's in such poor taste. It's so disrespectful. But at the same time, it's exactly what this division needs. The welterweight division, which has been really stale for the last year and a half or to 2 years, since whenever it was that Tyron Woodley knocked out Robbie Lawler, there hasn't really been a feud. There hasn't been an interesting matchup. The 2 snooze fests between Tyron Woodley and Wonderboy, followed by, Tyron Woodley and Damian Maia, in which nothing happened. This division is in desperate need of a little bit of personality. And while I can't condone any of the things that he said, I think it's pretty necessary at this point. So he also called out Tyron Woodley. He said he's going to break down his door to take his belt. And later on in another post-fight interview, he basically said that him and Tyron Woodley have fought in the gym before, and they were supposed to go 5 rounds, but after about 2.5 rounds, Tyron Woodley said he didn't want anything else to do with it. And Tyron Woodley didn't really deny that happened, but he's also saying, like, there's no witnesses, so you can't really prove that it happened. I got to say, man, I'm intrigued. Colby Covington is by no means deserving of a title shot. I think the title shot should go of the Jorge Masvidal Wonderboy fight or to the winner of the Robbie Lawler Rafael dos Anjos fight. Probably more so the latter. But Colby Covington made a pretty strong case, and he cut a pretty decent promo. And you know, a lot of people were talking about him. Like I said, my whole Twitter feed was Kobe Covington, how much everybody hates him this morning on Twitter. But he accomplished what he set out to do, and that's make people talk about him. And whether people realize it or not, they're giving him what he wants by talking about what a dick he is and what a douchebag he is on social media. That's exactly the result he wanted. So mission accomplished for Kobe Covington. I don't know what's next for him, but I know I'm going to be watching and listening. What are your thoughts here, Jeff?
Yeah, definitely, Bill. No matter what happens, whatever consequences may come, I definitely want to see Covington in there again. I thought he fought smart. And like I said, man, he's got publicity. He's getting his name out there. So I don't think it was the right way to go about it. But, I mean, it's one of those things like it's a good idea. Just I think he went about it the wrong way. But it ended up working in his favor, I suppose.
Well, for sure. I mean, he got people's attention, and he got Tyron Woodley's attention because Tyron Woodley's been responding to people's comments on Twitter, and he seems a little bit flustered. So I think, it's a pretty fun situation. As much as I respect all the other fighters that are ahead of Kobe Covington in line, none of them are going to cause any drama to kind of build up a title fight, which is what this division really needs. And I think the higher-ups in the UFC will agree. We'll see what happens. I really think that the title shot should go to the Robbie Lawler, Rafael dos Anjos winner, especially because, Lawler, he was the champ and he just beat Cowboy Cerrone in an awesome fight. So he deserves to get back in there and get his revenge. But, there's not going to be any shit talking between Lawler and Woodley. They're going to both quietly go into the match, and the loser's going to go off into the sunset, and the winner's going to go on to the next thing, and that'll be it. There's not going to be. And same thing if it were Rafael dos Anjos, he's not a trash talker either. So I think the division needs a fire lit under it like this. And Kobe Covington is not a wordsmith. He's not great with words, but he is great at getting attention. So good thing for the welterweight division. All right, we have a lot to cover today, Jeff, so I want to kind of breeze over the rest of this card. Pedro Munoz with an awesome guillotine finish over Rob Font. One-handed guillotine from the mount, which is a super high-level move. I don't think a lot of people realize how high-level jiu-jitsu the submission was and how tight it was as soon as they flipped over Rob Font, who had never been finished before, tapping to Munoz. Super impressive. Really top shelf Brazilian jiu-jitsu. As a big fan of the guillotine, I was especially impressed by this one. And credit to Pedro Munoz. Did you catch this one, Jeff?
Yeah, I did, Bill. And yeah, I was super impressed with that. The guillotine from the top is really hard to pull off. Super effective technique. And you could tell right away it was cinched up tight. Rob Font was just frantically tapping. It was over as soon as he flipped him over. That was super sweet, dude. As a grappling guy myself, both of us are big fans of grappling. That was Christmas for us, man.
Yeah, for sure. It was super smooth, and it was a good fight leading up to that too. Very back and forth. Both of these guys are exciting. They're ranked 12th and 13th respectively, I believe. So I'm looking forward to seeing both of these guys back in there. Francisco Trinaldo edging out Jim Miller, and something we haven't really seen, I don't know if we've seen ever, and that's Jim Miller with an empty gas tank going into the third round. Told his corner, I have nothing left in between the second and third round. He was able to hang on and survive, but definitely took a beating in that third round, something we're not used to seeing from the Jersey boy, Jim Miller, who's one of the toughest competitors in the history of the sport. So maybe he just had a bad camp. Maybe it was traveling to Brazil, or maybe he's reaching the end of that rope. Once that gas tank starts to go, and that's basically been his bread and butter. He's just been able to out-tough his opponents, and that's the way Jim Miller beats people. But once that gas tank starts to go, you got to start to question where he is in his career. So there was that. And I'm just going to go over a couple of these, Jeff, and then you tell me which fights you want to comment on. Thiago Santos, looking like more and more of a monster every time he gets in there. And this is one of the fights I told you to watch out for last week, Jeff. I thought it would be a slugfest. Jack Hermansson getting in there and sloppy with his takedown attempts. He had great footwork, but he didn't move his head too much off the center line. And when you do that against Thiago Santos, you're going to sleep. And he went to sleep with about a second before the bell rang in the first round. And he wasn't saved by the bell. He was knocked out by the sledgehammer, Thiago Santos. John Lineker and Marlon Vera having a really exciting bantamweight fight. All right, so let's stop there. So out of those three, Trinaldo and Miller, Santos, Hermansson, Lineker, and Vera, anything jumping out to you, Jeff, that you want to comment on?
Yeah, all three of these were awesome fights, Bill. But I think that if you're going to go back and watch one of them, for me, it was Thiago Santos versus Jack Hermansson. Super crazy fight. Thiago Santos he's got hammers for hands, dude. And I think that the ref messed that one up. I think he should have stopped it a lot sooner. I think Hermansson took some unnecessary and brutal punishment.
Yeah, I think I can't speak for the ref there, but I think the thought may have been he knew there was only seconds left. Maybe he can hang on. Jack Hermansson's a tough guy, but yeah, I agree. Could have been stopped a little bit earlier. Thiago Santos just looking scarier every time he gets in there. So exciting things for him. Still one of the worst tattoos in the history of the sport. That Thor hammer on his chest. I don't approve, Jeff. I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but
I think it looks kind of cool. He's got Mjolnir on his chest. He's got hammers for hands. No. It makes sense, Bill.
No, when he's older and like all his muscles are deflated, it's gonna look like a melting anchor on his chest. I can't condone this, and it's a little bit too phallic for my taste. It's kind of like the Brock Lesnar dagger penis tattoo. So Vicente Luque coming in last minute to end the undefeated streak of Nico Price with a nasty Bravo choke. That's a painful ass choke, Jeff. You and I both know how much that one hurts. It's just like crushes your windpipe. Not like other chokes where it kind of slowly cuts off the circulation to your brain. Bravo choke is nasty. Just crushing the windpipe. And then another submission, Antonio Carlos Jr., the man they call Shoeface, submitting Jack Marshman. And another really impressive submission was the first fight on the card, Marcelo Gom with a nasty rear naked choke on Christian Colombo after beating the fuck out of him. So any thoughts on any of those three submissions? Three Brazilians, I believe, and three impressive submissions there on the undercard. Any thoughts on any of those, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm only going to give you thoughts on the one that I saw. And that was the Vicente Luque fight. This was nuts, dude. Nico Price goes in for kind of a sloppy takedown, and Luque just ties him up, flips him over, and it looked like a Darce choke a little bit, but super sweet. Tapped as soon as they hit the ground. And those are the subs that I love to watch, Bill. Those ones that just as soon as they sink them in, it's over. So very nice. The other fights, the other submissions, I'm sure were awesome as well, but that's just the one I was able to catch.
Awesome. Yeah. So overall, great card. Awesome submissions. A lot of drama, some great potential matchups coming out of it. Not much more you can ask for a free fight night. So next week is not going to be free, especially not for you, Jeff, because you bought some expensive seats to this one. UFC 217 in Madison Square Garden. Before we get into that, I want to get a little more into my my booze trail here. So I was telling you the other day, this was a stop I had to fit in, and I stayed in Cottonwood, Arizona. So on my trip, flew into Phoenix and then started working my way north. And Cottonwood is kind of halfway in between where I am now and Phoenix. So tried a lot of different things, a lot of awesome food. There's a lot of great South American food here, a lot of great Mexican food, amazing tacos, some of the best tacos I've ever had in my life here in Arizona. So hats off to Arizona for incredible tacos and great South American food, Southwestern food. A lot of Mexican influences here, and it's a beautiful thing. So made my way up to Cottonwood, and this is in the Verde Valley territory. Beautiful scenic drive from Phoenix to Cottonwood, and from Cottonwood to where I am now. Beautiful landscape. So I had to stop in Old Town Cottonwood, and I had to go to Merkin Vineyards because this is the vineyard that is owned by the lead singer of one of my favorite bands of all time, and that's Tool. Maynard James Keenan is now a winemaker, or he has been a winemaker for a long time, and he has a tasting room in Old Town Cottonwood, which is a really beautiful small town. It's like a little strip of a town. It's like a main street, and a lot of restaurants, live music, stuff like that. So I heard Maynard on Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm sure a lot of you who listen to this podcast also listen to Joe Rogan's podcast. So if you heard the episode with Maynard James Keenan, it was about a month and a half back, maybe 2 months back. So I heard him talk about his winery and tasting room that he has in Old Town Cottonwood, and I already had this trip planned. So I made it a point to stop at the tasting room, and I gotta say, Jeff, it was the best food I've had on this whole trip. And the wine is incredible. I know you're not a fan of wine, Jeff, but I have to advocate for this Tarzan Red. It's all of his red wines are super dry, which I'm a fan of dry red wine. I don't like anything that's too fruity. I think a lot of whiskey drinkers are very similar. We don't really go for fruity wines. It's more on the dry side, bold, kind of vanilla, leathery tobacco taste. I'm not a wine connoisseur by any means. I'll talk your ear off about whiskey all day, but I do like a nice dry glass of red wine every now and then. So for those on YouTube, I'm holding up the bottle here. The logo is kind of like a Vitruvian man with the just a bushel of grapes over his junk. Awesome wine. And I'll tell you the truth, Jeff. I was going to look for any excuse to kind of like the wine because I'm such a big fan of Maynard and, lead singer of Tool, Perfect Circle. Pucifer is his other band. I believe he's going on tour with Perfect Circle pretty soon. And he also has a jiu-jitsu gym in Old Town Cottonwood. I wanted to try and get in there and take a class and get some rolls in, but unfortunately, the timing didn't work out. There wasn't a class going on or open mat or anything, so I didn't have the opportunity to do that. But I am glad I got the opportunity to go to his winery tasting room in Osteria, it's called. And I had some incredible mac and cheese there with like a pancetta cream sauce. It was out of this world. Prickly pear infused pasta. And prickly pear is like basically, I guess, some kind of cactus. It's in a lot of stuff out here, but whatever it is, it was fucking delicious. I had to get a bag of it to go, and I had to get a bottle of wine to go. Awesome time. Jeff, I know you're not a wine drinker, but would you be willing to give this a shot on my recommendation if I were to put some in front of you?
Bill, you're the one who got me into this business, so yes, I think I would try it. Although, if I absolutely have to drink a wine, it's usually a white wine.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I just like them a little bit more. Although there's this place in the city, in like the theater district. I forget the name of it. It's this Russian spot, and I had the what's that meat they do? I forgot what it's called. Name escapes me, but I had a really good glass of red wine over there. So every now and then I think it's okay, Bill, but it's not something you do more than like twice a year.
Okay, fair enough. I like a glass of red wine on Christmas Eve and like another random Sunday. How about that?
That's fine. That's acceptable to me.
But yeah, I like a dry red wine that kind of kicks you in the chest a little bit, kind of like warms you up, and yeah. But I'm back to my bourbon here, Jeff. No worries. I'm not changing teams on you. And I usually don't like white wines. I usually don't like white wines because they're a little too sweet for me, unless it's like a Chardonnay or something. But even then, it's like I'll only drink it if it's the only thing around. And I can't do champagne. I've never had a taste for it. I don't know why. I know some people like it, and I've even had some like really expensive champagnes that people insisted I try, and I'm like, this is nowhere near as good as beer. I think that people like it because it's classy, and it's like it just tastes like bubbly shit to me. Like I can't get into it, and I can't champagne. So, but big fan of the Tarzan Red from Merkin Vineyards, and their other wines are good too. The Shinola was my second favorite. So if you're looking for these, I do believe they're pretty widely distributed, so you can find them. And yeah, check out that episode of Joe Rogan podcast. I mean, I know I don't have to endorse Joe Rogan's podcast. It'd be better for me if he endorsed mine, but it was a really interesting episode. Maynard James Keenan is one of those mad genius kind of guys who's really interesting. MMA, really into jiu-jitsu. I believe he's a purple belt. And if I come back to Arizona, I want to try and check out his gym. It's a Verde Valley Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I did get to see it. I walked by. It looks like a pretty cool space. So if I'm back in the area, I'd like to get out there and get some training in. All right, Jeff. I know you're itching to talk about this UFC 217 that you'll be attending next week, and top to bottom is stacked. I know you're going to be in there as soon as the gates open up, from the first bell to the last. So you take the reins here, Jeff. Let me know what you want to talk about. What are your thoughts on this thing here? This is your time to shine, my friend.
Thanks, Bill. Bill, for me, this is a boyhood dream, man. Ever since I got into the UFC, I was like finishing college when I got into it. I was junior in college, and the one thing I always wanted to do was go to a pay-per-view event. And this is it, man. Everything's aligned. It's close to me. It's going to be at a venue I'm used to being at. I've been there for pro wrestling shows and hockey games and stuff like that. So this is it, man. But enough about that. Let's get into it. So, Bill, the main event is Georges St. Pierre.
Yeah,
Georges. His name ends with an S. So, Georges St. Pierre is challenging Michael Bisping for the middleweight title. But, Bill, it's been almost 4 years exactly since GSP has been in the octagon. His last fight was a questionable, debatable win against Johnny Hendricks. So, Bill, what do you think here? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't see St. Pierre winning this one. I think the ring rust is going to be too much. I know he's been training like every day, but you can't mimic 5 rounds in the octagon for a title. You just can't mimic that in the gym. But, Bill, talk me out of it, Bill. Do you think that GSP can win this?
Oh, man. That's a tough one, Jeff. I don't like to give predictions, but I'm kind of with you. On paper, there doesn't seem to be a way for GSP to win this fight. You're talking about moving up in weight, and GSP's bread and butter is wrestling. He's one of the best wrestlers in the history of MMA, and that's wrestling for MMA. That's not being a wrestler before getting into MMA. So he has no wrestling pedigree whatsoever, but somehow became the best MMA wrestler of all time. I'll give you another stat, Jeff. Georges St. Pierre has not finished a fight in 8 years. So I don't know what his plan is to get Michael Bisping out of there. I know GSP has been training with the Danaher Death Squad quite a bit with your buddy Jake Shields, Gary Tonin, and those guys. So maybe he's sharpened up his submission skills, but you're talking about moving up in weight against a guy who used to fight at 205. Now, back in the day, Georges St. Pierre didn't want to move up to fight Anderson Silva for a super fight because he said he would need to take time and put on weight and do it the right way and everything like that. So on paper, Bisping, who used to fight at 205, is a much bigger fighter, has incredible takedown defense, and is an elite striker, one of the best kickboxers in the history of the sport, doesn't get a lot of credit, and mostly because he's an asshole. And people love him or hate him. There's not too many people in the middle. I kind of am in the middle on Michael Bisping. I can't say I've ever really rooted for him. Never really rooted against him too much. I think the first Dan Henderson knockout was one of the most spectacular highlight reels of all time that he was on the wrong end of. On paper, there's no way for George St. Pierre to win. On the other hand, I have to play devil's advocate with everything. One of the smartest fighters in the history of the sport, and he has always been very methodical about everything he's done. There's a reason he chose to come back now, and there's a reason he chose to come back against Michael Bisping. I think he sees something in Michael Bisping, some kind of weakness that he can capitalize on, and that's the only kind of shimmering light I can see for George St. Pierre here. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a very grim comeback for him. I know he has put on some size, but you know, Bisping's a big dude, and he's got some awesome takedown defense, and man, and he's riding pretty high right now. He's a middleweight champion. He hasn't had to fight a contender in a while. So I'm more interested in the aftermath of this fight. If George St. Pierre wins, is he going to stay at middleweight? Is he going to defend the title against the monsters in that division? I mean, Robert Whittaker is next in line. And then beyond that, you got Yoel Romero. I can't see GSP getting in there with guys like that. So is he going to stay there? If Bisping wins, is he going to retire? So this might be the end of the line for the middleweight championship. It might be forfeited no matter who wins this fight. So what are your thoughts on the fight itself, Jeff, and the aftermath as well?
Yeah, Bill. I'm gonna give you the other side of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. I think that St. Pierre is in for a tough battle, man. Bisping, not only is he, you know, a very good striker, he's got the good takedown defense, and dude, he just got a huge frame, man. Is George going to be able to get inside of him? And if he does, and goes for a takedown, is there going to be a knee waiting for him? Something like that. But George, on the other side of that, is George St. Pierre is one of the best in the world at the sport that is mixed martial arts. And what I mean by that is he can mix it up really well, man. He mixes his takedowns and his strikes so well. He fakes takedowns off of faked strikes, and he you know, he does his Superman punches and all that off of feinting, going for a takedown. So you never know with St. Pierre. But I don't think it's a good idea to try and get Bisping on the ground, because Bisping's son is actually a really, really good jiu-jitsu competitor. I think he's won a couple of championships over on the West Coast. And, you know, I don't see why Bisping himself wouldn't jump in and train with him and train at the gym, at the jiu-jitsu gym. So a lot going on here. And I'm actually in the same boat as you in terms of the aftermath of all this, because Bisping has been talking about maybe retiring after this fight, whether he wins or loses, which at the end of the day, it won't matter. He'll have his legacy. He'll go down as a UFC champion. He'll go down as a guy who's beaten Anderson Silva. And if he wins, he can just retire anyway, because he'll be the only man who's ever beaten two greats in Silva and St. Pierre in the same lifetime. You know, that's like beating Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier.
Yeah, and throw Dan Henderson in there. That's another legend feather in his cap.
Definitely.
Most wins in UFC history, by the way, Jeff. Michael Bisping, winningest fighter in UFC history. Well, I think a lot of people don't really talk about that. Yeah, I mean, the guy should have a legacy for sure, but, you know, he's a dickhead. So that kind of tarnishes it for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people underestimate him for that reason. So again, on paper, I don't see a reason George St. Pierre should win this fight, but there is that what if, there is that magnetism about it. I don't want to care about George St. Pierre coming back because he's teased it for so long, and he's been the biggest cock tease in the history of the sport with this comeback. And I wrote him off a while ago, but I am intrigued, Jeff. There is that what if, because I don't see a way for him to win this fight, but he must see something in Michael Bisping. Talking about this for a long time, but we were pretty far in as it is, and there's a lot more to talk about on this card. Any closing thoughts on the Bisping St. Pierre situation here?
Yeah, just this last thing is, I think that at the end of the day, we're gonna need. I think that what's his name, Robert Whittaker is probably gonna end up becoming the middleweight champion. I don't see St. Pierre staying in the game again. If he wins another belt in another division, I think he'll have proved everything he needed to prove. So the middleweight division is going to be a little weird after next Saturday. So let's move on and talk about this is the fight that I'm excited for, Bill. It's the one I've been waiting for. Cody Garbrandt coming back after a really bad back injury against former teammate, friend, and current rival / enemy, TJ Dillashaw. So, Bill, what do you think about this fight, man? Because I'm super excited. The bad blood it's getting to a boiling point. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it is going to be awesome. I think when it gets a little closer to fight night, I'll be more excited just because we had the letdown of this fight not coming together, after they went through the whole Ultimate Fighter season, the season 25, where they were literally at each other's throats. But yeah, Cody Garbrandt, TJ Dillashaw, if you think about it, these are two of the best bantamweights of all time, and there's bad blood there. Who knows what's going to happen? It could end up being just a glorified sparring session where these guys are just going to respect each other a little bit too much because they both know what the other is capable of, and then it could be an all-out war. Cody Garbrandt, as we know, is pretty good at leaving his emotions out of the ring. I thought he was going to be too emotional in the fight with Dominic Cruz because in the build-up he was getting, really amped up, and usually that's a sign that a guy is not ready for the fight. But Cody Garbrandt looked spectacular against Dominic Cruz. So, getting too hyped before the fight is no indication of a bad performance for Cody Garbrandt. I think that's safe to say. And TJ Dillashaw is just a workhorse, man. He's got some of the most creative wrestling in the history of the sport. He's a phenomenal MMA wrestler. I think if you've never really grappled before, you can't really appreciate the subtleties in his wrestling game, but it's so high level that even like all-American wrestlers are in awe of what he's able to do. His takedowns in his last fight against John Lineker were otherworldly. The way he was setting them up was even hard for me to figure out what he was doing, where these takedowns were coming from. Night and day from Damian Maia's takedown attempts last night against Kobe Covington. So yeah, it's going to be an awesome fight, but I do have a little bit of the wind taken out of my sails on this one just because, we had that letdown the last time. Any other thoughts on this fight, Jeff?
Yeah, Bill, I'm super excited. I think that I think that both of them have the capability to finish each other, but I don't think we're going to see a finish just because they know each other so well. They'll probably try and be a little bit more methodical about it. So, super excited for this one. Can't wait. And Bill, there's a third title fight on this card that we got to talk about, and that is strawweight champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk taking on Rose Namajunas, who has fought for a title before.
Yeah, so at the end of her season, The Ultimate Fighter, it was the beginning of the strawweight division, and she fought Carla Esparza for that strawweight title and didn't come away with the win, but she has improved leaps and bounds since then. But it's been the Joanna Jędrzejczyk show ever since then, when she demolished Carla Esparza and then pretty much everyone else that's been put in front of her, with the exception of maybe Karolina Kowalkiewicz. That was a really, really close fight. I want to say that Rose is not ready for this title fight, but you never really know, what's going on with the fighter. Supposedly, in her last couple of losses, she had some personal things going on, and she seems to be in a good headspace for this. The other side of the coin is that Joanna may underestimate her. She seems a little bit in her interviews, as opposed to, being the killer she's been leading up to past fights. So if she takes Rose Namajunas lightly, and she's even said she wants to grapple with Rose Namajunas, I don't think that would be a good decision. She may just be talking to build a fight, but I want to say that Rose isn't ready for this fight. But I kind of thought the same thing with Cody Garbrandt when he fought Dominic Cruz. I thought he wasn't ready. I didn't think Holly Holm was ready to fight Ronda Rousey. Rose Namajunas only 9 professional fights. Granted, Joanna Jędrzejczyk only has a handful more. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be a really interesting fight. I think if Rose is able to pressure Joanna, possibly get this fight to the ground, we could see a new champion. So, Jeff, let me ask you this. I want to ask you your thoughts on that fight. What's the over-under on one belt changing hands next Saturday night? Do you think more than one belt changes hands, or no belts change hands? I know I'm putting you on the spot, so maybe give me your thoughts on the Rose Joanna fight, and then maybe let that simmer a little bit. How many belts do you think are going to change hands, if any?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Bill. I say 0 belts change hands on Saturday. I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a clean sweep for the champs. But I agree with you, man. I don't think Rose is ready for this fight yet. She's so young, and she's been looking better and better every fight. But I don't know, man. I think it's a different type of pressure. It's a different type of fight. It's not a 3-round fight, Bill. This is 5 rounds. She's gone the distance once, I believe. But, dude, that was a while ago, man. So I don't see her pulling it out. I think Joanna's stand-up is just way too much for anybody in that division. Maybe except for Karolina Kowalkiewicz. But for everybody else, I think she's miles and miles ahead.
All right. I'm going to go the other way on it, Jeff. And I think we should make this interesting. Let's say a shot of whiskey for the winner next time we see each other. I'm going to say one belt changes hands next week. So,
okay.
So next time I see you, we'll do a nice bourbon and a loser pays. So let's let's have a gentleman's agreement. We can't shake hands through the internet here, but let's see that. The fight that really intrigues me too on this card, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Jorge Masvidal. This is an interesting fight. Masvidal, probably some of the best boxing in the sport right now. Wonderboy, some of the best, whatever it is Wonderboy does in the sport right now. This is a fucking fight, Jeff. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Bill, this is going to be super, super interesting. I can see the winner of this one being the next contender, like you said before. And yeah, dude, I don't know who to give this one to. Masvidal's been on a bit of a roll, and Wonderboy coming off of 2 losses, man. 2 very, 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 very uninteresting losses. So we'll see which way it goes.
Well, he's coming off a draw and a loss. Don't forget, Jeff.
Right. My mistake. A draw and a loss. Very uninteresting loss. The draw was definitely more exciting. But yeah, dude, this is going to be super exciting. I want to see if Masvidal can handle the reach and the long style fight that Wonderboy's going to give him, because Wonderboy's so good at getting in and out of bad spots. He'll land maybe 1 or 2 punches in the pocket and then be out before you can respond. So that'll be really interesting to see how Masvidal deals with that.
Yeah, and Masvidal is great at avoiding people's strengths, and he's great at doing it without running away from them. I mean, he was able to neutralize Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu. Damian Maia even had his back and wasn't able to finish him. Masvidal is just a real crafty fighter, so he must have a game plan in mind to deal with Stephen Thompson. I can't see the winner of this fight getting a title shot unless it's Jorge Masvidal. I don't think the UFC will put Wonder Boy back in there with Tyron Woodley. I don't think Wonder Boy will see another title shot until somebody else is the champion. So Tyron Woodley retiring or somebody beating Tyron Woodley will be the next time Wonder Boy sees a title shot, in my opinion. Masvidal, I could see getting in there if he wins. What's interesting is Masvidal and Colby Covington are boys. They're training partners. So, who knows what's going to happen here? It should be interesting. Something that's not too interesting to me is the fight right before this on the main card for some reason. And there's so many better fights that could be on the main card. Jeff, if you're looking to get a fighter's autograph, all you'll have to do is hang around Shake Shack in Times Square, and you might run into Johnny Hendricks before he cuts weight. So Johnny Hendricks and Paulo Henrique Costa going at it. I believe this is part of the main card. I don't know why. I hope I'm just looking at it in the wrong order here, but I don't care about this fight. I'll go over a couple other things here. James Vick, Joe Duffy, interesting fight. Walt Harris and Mark Godbeer was supposed to happen a couple weeks ago, but Walt Harris stepped up to fight Fabricio Verdum. That's an interesting fight. Iwan Kutelaba fighting against Mikhail somebody. I don't even want to try and butcher his name. Mickey Gall, Randy Brown. This is going to be an awesome fight. A lot of people may not know who Randy Brown is. This is the battle for who's the best fighter to come out of Dana White looking for a fight, since Mickey Gall has already beaten Sage Northcutt. Both of these guys were products of that show. Alexei Olnik hiding on the undercard. This guy is one of my favorite fighters right now. I mean, a guy who, I don't know how many times I brought this up, Jeff, Ezekiel choke while being mounted. This guy is a bad motherfucker. To have somebody mount you and you still choke them out is insane. Coming off his win against Travis Brown, which was an awesome fight. He's on the undercard against Curtis Blades, who has also looked impressive lately. I think this is an awesome heavyweight fight, and I'm glad you're going to be there in person to give me the play-by-play in case I can't catch this one. And then Corey Anderson, Ovin St. Preux hiding buried at the bottom of this card too. That's a pretty interesting fight. And that's all I got to say. Out of all those, Jeff, which are you most excited about, and which ones are you going to get up to refill your beer and get another popcorn while you're at the Garden this coming Saturday?
Oh, man, Bill, this is a really tough call because all four of those fights look phenomenal. But if I had to pick just one, I'm going to say Randy Rude Boy Brown versus Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall fighting out of New Jersey, and Randy Rude Boy Brown fights in New York City. One of my grappling coaches has actually worked with Brown, so got a little bit of a personal tie. I got to actually talk to Rude Boy Brown for a second when he won his fight in Newark. That was Anthony Rumble Johnson versus what's his name? Ryan Bader. That was a fight.
That's right.
Yeah, so I got to actually meet Rude Boy Brown. Super nice guy. So definitely want to see that fight. And then from there, definitely St. Preux versus Anderson. I don't know why that's an early prelim, Bill. That's going to be on UFC Fight Pass, but I'm going to be there for all of them. I want to make it a day affair. I'm looking at like 10 hours here. So the fight that I'm going to get up to go refill my Brooklyn Brewery cup is going to be Johnny Hendricks. I think I'll go for a food run.
Yeah, good choice. Go grab a couple beers, take your bathroom break, plan it out around that time. Yeah, you and I were both at that card, Jeff, the Ryan Bader Rumble Johnson card, but we were on opposite ends of the arena, and I don't think we even knew each other too well at that point. I think we had barely even choked each other by then.
Yep.
Take that however you will, folks. So, Jeff, I have a lot more alcohol to talk about, but I don't want to blow it all on this episode. I have so many more interesting things that I've been drinking here in Arizona, but I want to kind of spread it out a little bit. Have you been sipping on anything interesting, or have you been taking it easy on the booze, preparing your liver for the UFC 217 in Madison Square Garden?
Yeah, dude. This UFC thing, I want to go all out for it. So I've been repressing the cravings. And then Saturday, I don't know how much I'm gonna remember, Bill, but I'm gonna be taking tons of pictures. So
Awesome. Well, I'm sure you'll be texting me, and I'll be sending you some texts while I'm watching it from wherever I am. And I am going to be in Arizona for the next couple of days. So if anybody has any more recommendations, I did find a really awesome Arizona whiskey. I'm going to leave this as a cliffhanger because, you know, we've talked about so much, but there is a really awesome whiskey company out of Tucson, Arizona that I discovered while I was here. And I'm really excited to talk about it. But, you know, I don't want to get into too much on one episode. We've talked about so much already. It's already been so over the top and under the influence, as always. If you want to get a hold of Jeff, if you want to hear him live tweet from Madison Square Garden next week at UFC 217, it's at @animal_Wilson on Twitter. And you guys all know how to get a hold of me by now. It's at MMA on the Rocks, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere else. Please send us your drink recommendations, your thoughts on the fights, your thoughts on the podcast, your thoughts on life. Really, we're willing to talk to anybody about anything. So reach out to us on your favorite social media platforms. Until next time, cheers, everybody. Goodbye.